Welcome to EasyDeploy's YouTube channel. In this tutorial, we will see about how to migrate AWS Cognito user pool to another AWS account. Use case. One of our customer wants to implement AWS Control Tower to standardize his environment. He approached us to implement the same. His current setup had all the dev, QA, and prod workloads running on the same AWS account. In order to implement Control Tower as per AWS best practices, we need to split the workload environments to different AWS accounts. This required the Cognito user pools to be migrated to different AWS accounts. We migrated the Cognito user accounts by the upcoming steps in this video. Do you need help in setting up this migration? Please feel free to contact us in the email mentioned. contact@easydeploy.io. What is covered in this video? We will be creating the OAuth flow, allow admin user password auth enabled in old user pool account. Creating a cross-account role for trusts the execution role of Lambda. Creating the OAuth flow user password auth enabled in new user pool account. Creating the Lambda execution role and STS assume role. Creating the trigger user migration for new user pool account to call the migration Lambda function. Creating the Lambda function in the same account as the new user pool account. Download the Lambda source code. Why migrate user pools? There is various scenarios that require a migration between two Cognito user pools. Adding/changing Cognito custom attributes requires to create a new user pool. Business restructuring or organizational changes. Security compliance requirements. Prerequisites. AWS account. AWS account with admin access and IAM full access. Basic understanding of AWS, AWS Cognito, Lambda, roles and policy. Creating OAuth flows and cross-account role, Lambda function, trigger user migration. Creating a new user pool client app in the old user pool. This client must have the OAuth flow allow admin user password auth enabled. Now log into the AWS account of existing user pool, which we refer to as the source account. Navigate through the Cognito service. Select the user pool that you would like to migrate. I have a list of users that I need to migrate to another AWS Cognito account. Select App Integration and scroll down the page. Click Create App Client. I'll leave the app type as the default setting. I've named the app client Demodist. In the Authentication Flows section, select Username Password Auth for admin. Hosted UI settings. For the allowed callback URLs, I've specified localhost for testing purposes. You can provide any URL you prefer. Click Create App Client. Note down the newly created client app ID and user pool ID. We will use these values later to configure the Lambda environment. Let's go to our slides to see the next step. Create the new user pool that are allowed to trigger user migration. These clients must use the OAuth flow user password AUTH enabled. Log in to the destination account. Navigate through the Cognito service. Click the Create User Pool. Provider type, I leave it as default. Cognito User Pool sign-in options, select the username and email options. Password policy, I leave it as default. MFA, I select no MFA, and other details I leave as default. I'll leave these details as default. Email, I select send email with Cognito. Other details I leave as default. User pool name, I mentioned app. Select use the Cognito hosted UI. Cognito domain, I mentioned a demo. App type, I leave it as default. App client name, I mentioned app. For the callback URL, I've mentioned localhost. You can specify any URL you prefer. Select the advanced app client settings for authentication flows. Select the allow user password AUTH. Other details, I leave it as default. Finally, click Create User Pool. Let's move back to the slide for the next step, creating the Lambda execution role and Lambda function. Navigate through the Lambda service. Click on Create Function. Select Author from Scratch. I have mentioned the function name as User Migration. Select the runtime notage as 16. Click Create Function. After creating the Lambda function, select the permissions, then choose the role name that was created. It will take you to the Lambda execution role. Select the Add permission. Select the Attach policy. Select the Amazon Cognito Power User policy. Click Add permission. Click on Add permission and create an inline policy. Select the JSON editor view. In the action field, add STS, assume role. In resource field, add a cross-account Cognito role ARN. We will create this role later on source account with the same name. Please note that the ARN will have account ID of source account. You need to replace it with yours. I have mentioned the policy name STS assume role. Click on Create Policy. Let's move back to the slide for the next step. Download the Lambda source code and upload it. Download the Lambda function code repository from the link provided in the description. Let's update the download zip file into the created Lambda function. In the code source section, click on Upload From and select the .zip file. Upload the Lambda zip file that we downloaded earlier. Click Save. Let's move back to the slide for next step. Creating the user migration trigger executes a Lambda function. Navigate through the Cognito service. Select the DApp user pool which we created earlier. Select the user pool properties. Select the Add Lambda trigger. Trigger type, select the signup. Signup option, select the Migrate User trigger. Select the Lambda function that we created earlier. Click on Add Lambda trigger. Let's move back to the slide for the next step. Creating a cross-account role for old user pool allows the Amazon Cognito Power User actions, and that trusts the execution role of the Lambda function in the destination account. Log in into the source account and navigate through the IAM service. Access Management section. Select the role. Click on Create Role. The Trusted Entity Type section, select the AWS account. An AWS account section. Select the Another AWS account and provide the destination account ID. Select the permission Amazon Cognito Power User. Specify the name we provided earlier in the Lambda execution roles STS assume policy under the resource ARN. Click on Create Role. Now select the created role. Select the trust relationships. Edit trust policy. Scroll down, click on Add a condition. Select the condition key external ID. Qualifier, select the default. Operator, select the string equals. Value, I have mentioned external Cognito. Click Add condition. Modify the ARN role that we created in the Lambda execution role in the destination account. Click on Update Policy. Note down the external ID value and cross-account role ARN. We will use these values later to configure the Lambda environment. Let's move back to the slide for the next step. Configure the environment variables in the Lambda function of the destination account. Now log into the destination AWS account and navigate through the Lambda function which we created earlier. Select the configuration. Select environment variable in the list. Edit the environment variable. Click Add environment variable. Mention the key name Old Client ID. For the value name, provide the value from the source account's user pool client ID. Mention the key name Old External ID. For the value name, provide the noted value of the source account's external ID from earlier steps. Mention the key name Old Role ARN. For the value name, provide the value of the source account's cross-account role ARN. Mention the key name Old User Pool ID. For the value name, provide the value of the source account's Cognito User Pool ID. Click Save. Now navigate through the Cognito User Pool service. Select the user pool. Right now, there will be no users present in this user pool. The user migration trigger executes a Lambda function whenever a user isn't found in the user pool during login, and Cognito will automatically create the user. In order to migrate the users, we need to access the new user pool URL mentioned in the description and log in with the same old user credentials. Please note that you need to replace the domain, client ID, callback URL with those of your new Cognito user pool created in the destination account. Access the URL of new user pool. It will take you to the sign-in page. Provide your existing username and password. Click Sign In. It will sign in through the newly created user pool. After signing in, navigate to the newly created user pool, where you can see the signed-in user generated in the new user pool. Conclusion. In this video, we have created new user pool identity and destination account, created cross-account role, created Lambda function and execution role, created user migration trigger in user pool identity, migrated and tested the user pool identity, Do you have any questions? Please feel free to comment or contact us at our email ID or contact us page. We will be happy to reply you. EasyDeploy is an authorized AWS cloud consulting partner. We have helped various organizations in adopting their cloud journey by architecting, implementing, and managing their environment with AWS best practices.